This is Builders Wanted, the podcast for people shaping what's next in customer engagement. Today's episode is something special. We're recording from Twilio Transform in New York City, where some of the most forward-thinking minds in tech are gathered to talk about what's possible. As we close out the year and look ahead to 2026, we're sitting down with someone who's not just observing the future, but helping invent it. Rikki Singh is Twilio's VP of R&D for Emerging Technologies, leading the charge on what's next in AI, security, communications, and more. If you've ever wondered where the smartest builders think we're going, or how to prepare your teams in tech for what's next, this one's for you.
This podcast is brought to you by Twilio, the customer engagement platform that helps businesses turn real-time data into seamless, personalized experiences. Engage customers on their terms across SMS, voice, email, WhatsApp, and more. Power every interaction with AI so conversations feel natural, not robotic. Adapt in real time, delivering the right message on the right channel exactly when it matters. That's the power of Twilio. More than 320,000 businesses, from startups to Fortune 500s, trust Twilio to transform customer signals into conversations, connections, and real revenue. Reimagine the way you engage with your customers. Learn more at twilio.com.
Rikki, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. We're at Twilio Transform. We're live in New York today, and you're on the bleeding edge of technology. You're really building what's next. So I wanted to start off with a little bit of a softball for you, which is what excites you most as we head into 2026?
Oh, I don't know if it's a softball because it's a question that opens so many things. I think 2025 has been such an exciting year. This is the year we've seen voice calls being made on non-terrestrial networks. We've seen quantum key distribution over satellite, which expands secure communications globally. And of course, we've seen generative AI. We've gone from asking questions to generating images to having active debates about whether agents should be making transactions on our behalf. So much has transpired in 2025. It almost feels like we're at that next leap on technology.
I love it. I mean, you're saying some words that I quite literally am hearing for the very first time today. So that's exciting for me to learn about things like non-terrestrial networks. So I want to get into that. But one of the things that you're mentioning that I think we're going to talk about a little bit is some of these things lead to more trust, which I think is a theme that we'll be talking about. One of the things that I want to learn from you is what feels different today versus a year ago.
So I think the start of 2025 was all about AI, right? And we almost I think middle of 2025, there were statements like, we don't need software engineers anymore. We're just going to vibe code our way into production. AI is going to write all code that exists.
Heard it.
Engineers were reconsidering, maybe I should be a plumber now and not an a lot was going on. I think what's different now is we're recognizing both the strengths as well as the practical limitations of the technology. We're recognizing that, yes, you could accelerate prototyping, testing, greenfield development with vibe coding, but you're not going to vibe code or YOLO your way into production.
When you're not going to YOLO your way into production. Clip it. Love it.
When that pager beeps, you're on call, and imagine trying to debug code that you never paid attention to the first time around.
This has always been my thought. It's you have to know how to code, right?
Exactly. And more so than ever before, because if you're not able to understand what AI is generating and you can't apply good systems design rigor to it, we will all be maintaining black box code, and we'll basically be at the mercy of AI to go and debug and help us fix when something goes wrong. And so now more than ever, the fundamentals of good engineering matter. I also think we've come to realize that when you write software, and I'm anchoring on writing software because I think 2025 has been the year where the most at-scale use case of generative AI has been coding. And I think we're at a point where we're recognizing, yes, you can spit out more code faster, but that's inner loop. That just pushes the bottleneck to your outer loop, which is all around testing, your CI/CD pipeline, how quickly can you get it to production?
Right.
What does your feedback loop look like? And so it's almost like you have a process in which you just push the bottleneck further out rather than actually speed up the process.
Right.
I'm also very hopeful that we stop thinking about it as an acceleration of a process and think about how it helps towards innovation and not just efficiency. So I think those are the things that I feel are evolving,
Yeah.
and that excites me.
That's so interesting. I've never heard the inner loop, outer loop scenario, but in my day-to-day, I feel this because it's like, I no longer maybe am editing things a little bit more upfront in the process. I'm like taking AI slop and I'm editing that instead. So it's like, you're just doing it a little bit later in the process, but you still need to be a subject matter expert to be able to actually accomplish the goal that you want to accomplish.
Yeah, and like we've seen it in all ways, right? It's a little bit of garbage in, garbage out.
Totally.
And I do think the one thing that does us disservice is when we believe that generative AI is reasoning, when what it's doing is like probabilistically calculating the next word that makes sense. And the more we can ground ourselves in that, the more, like, I think it's a phenomenal problem solving companion,
Yeah.
right? You can go through iterations of refining your own thinking by leveraging it to challenge your assumptions, by leveraging it to ask the right questions. So I almost like that to me is value. And then it allows you to like almost do away with the grunt work a little bit and do the things about your role that excite you, right?
Yeah.
As a PM, like summarizing the PRD is the last thing, but the process that you go through as you're thinking through the requirements, the edge cases, that's when a PM is in the flow, right? And so you can almost use it as a problem-solving partner versus I think right now we think of it as primarily content generation, whether
Totally.
that's for code, whether that's for marketing, whether that's for documentation. But I don't think that's the like unlock.
Right. But I mean, I think one of the underlying assumptions in what you're saying as well is that you're not outsourcing your thinking. You're still doing thinking alongside AI, which is a really important thing to call out. We're touching on AI. I'm wondering what themes or forces do you think are really going to shape the next 12 months?
The first one is these tools are expensive, right? And I think we're moving from AI for everything to an AI payoff year where it'll be critical to show the ROI on the investments we've made, right? And I think as companies go through that era, it'll become less about AI augmentation and thinking about, we'll move from sort of AI augment to true agentic. Swarm of agents is a word a lot of folks are using.
I don't know if I like that. It sounds like bees.
Exactly. Like I think it sounds negative more than
Yeah.
positive, but the idea that you have agents that collaborate and execute on actions that you've assigned to them versus have a constant human
Totally.
doing it, I think that's interesting. But again, like I go back to, it just cannot be about replacing humans or augmenting humans. It has to be more. Like the ROI has to be not just on a cost perspective, but on an innovation and revenue perspective. So the first theme is that, right? AI payoff, like being more thoughtful about what are the use cases that my customers want me to solve,
Right.
which I haven't been able to solve before, but now potentially can by applying some of these tools and technologies. Like I always say, if you are in a position where you have a hammer and you're looking for a nail, you're already in the wrong zone, right? Take a step back and think about what problems matter and like what's the best way to solve them rather than think about, well, I have an LLM, what can I throw it at?
Totally. Problem first. Yes.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
So that's, I think, the first thing. And they also say, like, fall in love with the problem, not your product, so that you can kind of make sure you do justice to it. The second thing is, I think that because of the cost aspect of the tech stack we're now adopting with generative AI, FinOps is not a choice anymore, right? Like, you almost have to think cost optimization from the get-go. And I think what's fundamental to that is platform engineering, like truly thinking about how do you define and build a tech stack that scales? How do you use creative approaches that bring down your cost? I mean, a very simple example is if you know people are going to ask a set of questions repeatedly, right? Let's take a support use case. If you know somebody's going to ask that same question repeatedly, you shouldn't be using an LLM to like go and then like understand that question and then like, no, you could use vector databases. You could like there are more deterministic ways that are cheaper and like just as effective. So I think getting smarter about how you do like FinOps optimization and your cloud infrastructure is critical. I think the third thing is, and this one is fascinating, right? I think like we went from designing screens to user-centered and, customer-first design, and UX was a whole thing, like with our iPhones, right? Like it became seamless. Like there was so much attention paid on how many clicks does it take for you to like
Yes.
get
Complete
to an
and fast.
outcome.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? Like how can you like simple modern
Frictionless.
designs make it frictionless? Now I think we're getting into an era where like the interaction models are changing.
Yeah.
Like if you look at Gen Z, they interact, their preference, and I find this fascinating. There's research that says Gen Z prefers voice for like a lot of their professional conversation.
Because that feels boomer to me, if we're being honest. Right? Yeah. My dad in his phone just, voicing text to me is what I think.
But I mean, this is a generation that's leaving voice notes like at work. Like,
one of my favorite forms of communication. But I'm not Gen Z, okay?
but I mean, there you go, right? So like we're talking about our preference for modalities changing. We're also talking about a world where maybe the next interface is just that chat window, right? And so like, how do you then design for that where you don't need buttons to do a workflow, but you basically want to be able to say what you want this thing to do, and maybe it's screenless. Like who knows, right? I'm super excited about like a world where we're engaging. We probably are not looking at a screen to do work tasks, right? I'm not talking about even personal consumer preference. Like you're trying to generate a report on, say in your case for marketing, right? Like, hey, what was the engagement? And you're not even looking at a screen. You just tell your phone, hey, can you create this report for me? And like it basically comes back with just the insights which you can play and listen to. And like,
this is a future I like, Rikki.
So that's great. Exactly, right? That's the new user experience. And then I'll come back to the point you mentioned earlier, which is the fourth theme that I think we're going to experience next year is like trust, right? And like, how do we almost by default design for zero trust environments? Because the thing about AI is, and we've seen examples of this, right? Well-meaning people give well-meaning prompts that the AI in a well-meaning manner misinterprets, right? And then like there's catastrophe. And so I think that we're entering a world where zero trust is not sort of optional. It's kind of the default. What that means is, we're talking about designing systems that have microsegmentation. Like you would not assume trust for any microservice that's even in your environment. You almost by default have to verify first, trust later. And so that's kind of the fourth theme that I think will shape a lot of the interactions.
A lot of these are driven by customer expectations, right? I mean, they're your best feedback loop. They always will be. So I guess I'm wondering, like, in changes in customer expectations, do you think more companies should be paying attention to that they're not right now?
I mean, customers are amazing, right? Like, they keep raising the baseline is how I think about it. Baseline UX at some point was the small BlackBerry screen. It evolved into these like seamless, larger interactions.
I miss my BlackBerry. Clack, clack. So
it
fun.
really made you feel like
tactile.
You would know if you had fat fingers. Like,
oh, for sure. Absolutely.
So I think, yes, it was fantastic from a security perspective, no debates. But I think, there were some human anatomy flaws that it like highlighted more than it needed to.
Human anatomy flaws. Love that.
So customer expectations keep evolving. And I think at this point, one of the things everyone jumps to is, oh, customers want personalization. And then that gets translated into targeting with ads. And I think that, yes, we expect personalization, but the reality is this. So post-COVID, like I think a combination of the COVID era combined with generative AI and what we've experienced with everybody throwing a chatbot at you, whether it's marketing or support.
Yeah.
I think Gen Z and like the current generation feels more isolated than ever before.
Absolutely.
And what they're craving is not targeting. What they're craving is connection. I mean, just look at the number of IRL clubs that got funded in the Valley in the last 2 years, right? Because We are genuinely craving human to human connection in a world that makes us feel more and more isolated, right? And I think it matters. Like, this is one of the things I feel deeply about it, with regards to Twilio's mission too, right? We talk about simple, smart, and trusted. And I think we talk about that in the context of engagement. I almost think it's in the context of connection, right? We want companies to be able to connect with the humans,
Absolutely.
not their phones, not their devices, not the laptop, with the human. And I think that happens when you understand them and you understand what they are looking for and you solve problems that matter to them. So I think, like, when we talk about contextual memory and our ability to, like, understand, for example, Kaylee, like, what are the things she cares about? How has she engaged with the brand before? Is she feeling frustrated today because she had a bad experience? Like, I'm caring about you as an individual through that. And how do we express ourselves, right? Through communication. So the fact that we want to give you contextual memory that is able to capture communication, that matters, right? Because that's where you're expressing your satisfaction, your happiness, your joys, so, like, how do we take that and then use that to help you rather than sort of micro segment you on demographics and target you, right? I think that's the, like, positive pivot I hope we make, as, like, this technology allows for that.
I love that. It reminds me, I mean, we're in New York, so I'll give you a New York example around this one, which is there was a recent viral Subway ad. Maybe you've heard of this. It's Friend or friend.com or something, which is this listening device, which is feeding on exactly what you're talking about right now, this idea of connection. It is this companion that can be with you at all moments of the day. And of course, New Yorkers did what New Yorkers do, which is trash the Subway ads and write, like, get a real friend, like, go outside, all that kind of stuff. But I think it's a really interesting trend that you're talking about because, yeah, you do really want to make sure that it's not the channel that matters. It's the human and the connection that you know about them that really matters. One of the things that I think this is kind of related to, which is a marketing trend that I'm watching, is there's a shift in buying committees. There's a shift in the ways that people are actually accessing information. And this example actually touches on both of those things, which is like Friend is using out of home, which is a really old medium, but it's using PR to basically gain trust with the public. And guess what happens? They get citations in the New York Times, they get, all of these articles written about them that then the LLMs spit out at you, which is a brand new channel. So you're seeing out of home and LLMs, an old channel and a new channel interacting. It's this really fascinating kind of thing that's starting to happen. And it's changing the way that we think about buying. It's kind of feeding into this idea of connection. So I love that you're bringing up this example.
You touch upon a very important point, right? Which is, we talked about how customer expectations are evolving. I also think that, like, how we explore and make purchasing decisions is evolving.
Totally.
Right? We're no longer sort of, or at least the bet is on the fact that you would trust your chat interface enough to allow it to make purchase decisions for you. I mean, guess what? Like, our entire infrastructure is built for targeting us with ads so that they can influence our buying decision. What happens when, like, the agent is the one that's deciding on your behalf? Like,
Yes.
what happens to influencer marketers who are, like, creating TikTok videos and the reality is they influence you because you trust them, right? You're like, I know this influencer, she has a kid, she does this, I trust her. I always think of it as, like, the moment we allow agents to make purchase or, like, legal decisions on our behalf, we're giving up agency. It's kind of ironic. Like,
Yes.
agents take away agency to some extent.
Totally.
And so in that world, what does marketing or influencer marketing specifically, like, even look like?
These are questions that we ask ourselves all the time. And to your point, what's really interesting is we're seeing that referrals from LLMs today convert way higher than other channels. So it's kind of feeding into this idea that that's exactly correct, is you're already trusting the LLM. You're already trusting the agent to tell you exactly what you need, which is, in my mind, maybe outsourcing the thinking a tiny little bit, like we were talking about a little bit earlier. But this kind of brings me to a question, which is, we're talking about buying committees, and I want to know what you think is evolving the fastest. Do you think the tech stack, the organization, or the buyers are moving the fastest?
Oh, it's funny you mentioned it in that order because I think that's the order in which things are happening, right? I do think the tech stack is evolving faster than ever before.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody keeps asking, right? What is the moat in the world of AI? Like startups say the moat is, time to market, and they're going to be the fastest to market. I think we know and we've seen that similar to how we were in the multi-cloud world, where we always had a primary and a secondary, like we're also seeing something similar happen with LLMs. Like you want to build infrastructures where LLMs can get swapped out based on your needs. We're seeing people try and replace. Like you started with the tool, you realize it meets like 10% of what you were looking for, and then you like evolve to the next thing. So I think the tech stack is definitely evolving the fastest because we're also like I said, right? We're recognizing the cost benefit trade-offs. We started with throw AI at every problem to now like realizing, okay, it's expensive.
Yeah.
And when I say expensive, it's not just the cost, right? I actually think it's expensive for the environment too. And it has long-running implications that we should be mindful about. I mean,
Yeah.
a question you ask to ChatGPT is far more expensive or is a much bigger tax on the environment than a question you were putting in Google search. So I think that's why I believe the tech stack is evolving the fastest, because we're getting smarter about where we should use that versus not. It's also a lot easier to adapt and change workflows on some of these things. And then I think the org ways of working, those are things that are just much harder to adapt.
Yes.
We're in this era, like I find this fascinating, right? We're in this era where we're like giving people the tool and saying, go, 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 just do things faster.
Find a use case.
Yeah, just like do things
Yeah.
faster. I think the real unlock is when we do things differently, not do things faster,
Yeah.
right? If I'm going to be a PM that wakes up and does the exact same process, but just a little bit faster, is that real value? Or if I start using it to change the way I was problem solving, to change the way I run experimentation with customers, to change the way I do synthesis and like bring teams along, that's real unlock. Just like reimagining our product development lifecycle, right? We've always had this thing of like, design will be in research and then PMs will be in like prioritization and scoping, and then the engineers follow. And we've always talked about, well, the handoffs cause disruption. It creates silos.
Yeah.
This is a great tool to like actually reconsider how we build products. Like you could bring more people along more seamlessly. You could run more rapid experimentations. In fact, like I think that we're entering a world where we release MVPs faster and then build with the customers. I know, forward deployed engineers is like a cool role and everybody's curious with what OpenAI is doing. I mean, the reality is what they're doing is they're building with the customers.
Yeah.
Because you have to drive adoption, you have to prove value. To prove value, you have to build in a way that acutely addresses that specific customer's needs and workflows and pain points. And so you're almost building the most table stakes thing, deploying with the customers and then building with them so that you can create most value, like maximize the value for them.
Yeah. In some cases, I think that that's like dangerous territory, like the new Sora release, right? It's like, okay, now they have to go back and they have to talk to all of these actors and all of these agencies to understand if they can use the likeness of those folks. And it's like, you probably knew that was a problem that was going to happen, but you're building out loud. Love that.
I think, so you're hitting on a very important point, which is what are the things you do by design versus what are the things you're okay experimenting with? I don't think copyright, trust, privacy, compliance are afterthoughts. They have to be by design, right? And then there are aspects like tweaking a workflow, tweaking a user experience, like changing maybe even like nuances of how you've built constraint prompts or how you're doing RAG as you deploy with customers. That's completely fine.
Yep.
So I almost think of like, and we say this a lot, right, actually. It's trust and privacy by design.
Yes.
It's compliance by design. So I think all of those aspects have to shift left. And then you have to be very intentional about the things you're experimenting with the customer.
Absolutely.
Great customer experiences aren't magic, they're built. And Twilio is the platform that helps you build them. Every customer action, browsing your site, opening an email, reaching out to support, triggers instant, AI-powered, personalized engagement across SMS, voice, email, chat, and more. No delays, no guesswork, just the right message at the right moment. From automated messaging to seamless authentication to hyper-personalized customer journeys, Twilio's customer engagement platform powers millions of interactions daily, helping businesses drive loyalty, optimize marketing spend, and create experiences that people remember. Twilio is the ultimate toolbox for customer engagement. Ready to build experiences that matter? Visit twilio.com.
I want to get your thoughts. We're talking a lot about AI, and you sit in R&D, and so I'm sure you have pretty strong opinions about this, which is what's overhyped and what do you think isn't maybe getting enough airtime?
I think that the whole race towards AGI is overhyped, not because I underestimate what it could do for us as humanity, but I think because of the practical limitations that exist from a technology perspective. I do think we either would need innovation on a power source perspective or quantum technology to enable the AGI vision we're all chasing.
Okay.
And so to me, I think this in the next 2 years, you will have AGI. I think that is overhyped.
So your P doom is a little bit further out than other folks. Got it.
Yeah. And I think on the flip side, I do think on underhyped, we're not talking enough about the innovation we need from a power perspective, both to combat climate change, but then also to fuel the technologies we are excited to adopt.
Totally.
So I think, we're trying, there are startups I think it's Inertia, which is looking at how to scale nuclear fusion-based power. And I think that's interesting because it's a clean energy source. It's not as doomsday as fission. And, it potentially can help us combat a lot of, I know we're in an era where we're debating going back to natural gas versus not and things like that. But the reality is the scale at which we need data centers and hence power is exponentially rising. And if you're going to build that many more data centers, I do think we have to be thoughtful about innovating on power sources. So to me, that's an area that I feel is underhyped relative to the hype on AI.
I love that. I think that there's been recent studies around this, which is showing that in general, all of the expenditures around AI they've increased the GDP by over 1%. So that is a pretty massive shift in where a lot of the dollars are going. So we're already seeing that, and power stuff is a huge, huge part of this. So I'm glad that you're bringing that up. What are we underestimating about where it's all going?
This statement holds true in every decade. I think change management is what we always underestimate.
You are so right.
Maybe it's because I started my career with Azure when cloud wasn't a popular thing to be on, and I had to do a lot of sort of convincing on moving from on-premise to cloud. But even though we say change is the norm, we all enjoy comfort, right? And it's not because we're not aware. I think it's because of the way our brain is wired. We like comfort because it brings predictability. And in a predictable environment, it's much easier to make decisions, right? Think about ERPs, think about CRMs. What have they done? They've converted well-defined business processes into software, right? They've almost the IP of these companies is depth in understanding the business processes that run any company, right? Whether that's how you do accounting, whether that's how you do supply chain, whether that's how you have your HR workflows, right? Compensation, everything. And that predictability, it's stayed there, right? For decades. For decades, this is how we build product. This is how we procure software or everything else. This is how we compensate employees. This is how we do financial announcements. It's all set.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about adopting technology that will only unlock value if you rethink all of that. So I'll take it to the other extreme, right? I know Satya Nadella said SaaS is dead, and people were reacting to that statement itself. But I think what he was trying to get at is SaaS as we've known, right, is going to change. We're not going to build software that converts well-known business processes or workflows into user experience. we're getting to a point where like personalized workflows that adapt will be a reality soon, right? So for example, you and I could both be doing brand marketing, but could have two very different workflows that work for us,
Yeah.
right? And we'll have a tech stack that allows for both of it. And it learns from it. And over time, it suggests what could be an ideal one for the size of our company, the scale of our company. I mean, I love to think of it this way, right? When you're a startup or an SMB, you may start your ERP, CRM journey on Monday.com or like one of these places, right? And then like every big company you see is like on Salesforce, SAP.
Yep.
And that's kind of accepted. Like, yeah, we grew, so we changed our tech stack. That
Absolutely.
makes total sense. We needed something that was more complicated, like and like much better at adapting to our complicated setup. That's kind of how we justify it. We're actually entering a world where like you could have adaptable workflows that grow with you.
Mm.
But that also means you're changing your business processes, right? Which is very unsettling. Like go tell a CFO that their financial workflows will like adapt to their finance or accounting team. And so I think that we're sort of underestimating the amount of change management and behavioral change and change in the way we hire folks, we upskill them, we support them on their job. All of that needs to evolve to truly like unlock the kind of future we're all betting on through the investments that you talked about earlier.
You're 100% right. I mean, it's the same kind of scenario we were talking about with tech stack or buyer or organization. Organizations are moving much slower than anybody else, like because they are maintaining whatever processes have existed and trying to jam new technologies or AI into them instead of rethinking the entire process itself. I want to get to like a real world example here. So I'm wondering, what do you think AI maturity looks like for customer engagement teams?
So I think I mentioned this before, right? But I think it is going from, it's on a few dimensions. So, and I'll use our like simple, trusted, smart only to like structure it, right? So I think on the simplicity side, it is moving from assuming default being screens to other modalities.
Yeah.
Like, I think the simplicity is not just in a simple UI anymore, it's in a simple user experience, whether that is texting back that you want to pay a bill or like leaving a voice note if you want to change stuff. All of those experiences being enabled. I think like that's sort of a shift that I'm seeing. The second one, I think on the smart front is the point I was making earlier, like moving from targeting to real connection. Like if you don't know the humans you engage with, I think that's a miss, right? Like we now have technology that allows you to get to know every human in a very like contextualized manner, and we should be harnessing that. And then I think on the trusted front, as I was alluding to earlier, it starts with like, I think low maturity is kind of what we're doing right now, right? Which is we've had frameworks for authentication authorization and the way we set up RBACs, the way we do consumer identity, and like kind of using that, but like enabling agent flows through it to, I think, higher maturity on the trust front where you assume an agent could be acting on behalf of humans. And then how do you enable that infrastructure? So some of the principles we talked about from a zero trust perspective, verify first, trust later, those kind of aspects, I think, are on the higher maturity side of the scale.
That's really helpful. It's interesting that you say we're in a low my kind of maturity curve right now. I was listening to Hard Fork's podcast a couple of weeks ago. They had a journalist on that just did this experiment. And this experiment was like, can I go 2 days without AI? And to be fair, his definition around AI was like pretty vast. He included machine learning within that. And so what he started to do was he literally collected rainwater because apparently in the state of New York, and I'm sure, elsewhere, they use machine learning to basically understand where they should be distributing water. So this is my thought around like low, high maturity, pervasiveness of AI. I'm wondering your perspective on this is 2026 the year where AI becomes ambient, pervasive?
Yeah, I think there is a consumer lens and a business lens to it. Is it going to be around? Yes. But also, like, I think of it as like it has been around. I mean, we've had AI ML models for the last decade,
Yeah.
right? I think what generative AI did is consumerize the technology to a great extent, then allowed for more I would say, organic conversations. Like AI ML models have been there in support for over a decade. You've been talking to chatbots before. I think the difference is the adaptability that has come into the flow, right? The non-deterministic nature also allows it to be more adaptable, which I think has been the change. So would it be everywhere? Yes, just like it has always been. I actually think the difference is going to be we get excited about technology, we start using it, and then slowly, like public policy, laws, everything else catches up.
Yep.
I think 2026 is when like things will catch up, right? What we want to do from a data governance perspective, how do we want to protect copyrights, right? We're having that active discussion right now. Like, how do we prevent AI slop from sort of taking over human creativity to some
Yes.
extent, right? Because like if everything you've ever created that's original, whether that's art, whether that's writing, whatever it may be, content, like if that can be ingested and then adapted by AI, how do we like build a society that still incentivizes creative pursuit? And so I think those are the questions we will have to answer in 2026, given that like the scale of adopting some of these things has grown exponentially this year.
Just small little questions that you're asking, just the tiny ones, Rikki, we'll solve them, no worries. I like this thought. I mean, it's already exists. It's already here. It already is pervasive, but it'll change a little bit as we head into 26. And some of the things that you're talking about that we really need to start thinking about have to do with this concept that we really started with, which is trust, right? So as we're heading into kind of the new year, I'm wondering how you think about trust within this framework. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it starts with the fundamentals, right? Which is first, just everything runs on data. So step one is actually just making sure that you have the right permissions to use that data. You are thinking about the right sort of compensation for the data you use for the folks that are providing it to you, right? You're thinking about the right segmentation, data governance, all of that, right? So like I almost think of it as like it starts there. There are some fundamentals we've always followed from a data protection and governance perspective. And I think we just need to get better at it. Then it gets into sort of as you use expressions of this data to generate things. I mean, even small things, right? Like, and Perplexity and ChatGPT have started doing this, which is like they're watermarking things that are AI generated. Because it's not just, I think trust is not just about me trusting that you're using my data well, but it's also then me knowing when I'm engaging with AI versus human, or me knowing when it's an interpretation by AI versus facts. I mean, journalism is a great example, right? Like, we trust the news we get because we trust journalists to go do the work. And now, if I'm looking at news that has been spit out by AI, like, step one is just like be transparent about the source of the information.
Right.
And then, as a consumer of that information, like, I will have to make intelligent choices about what I trust versus not. So, to me, like, I think trust is both in how you come up with the information, but then also how you communicate and then how you take feedback, right? The other aspect we haven't talked about a whole lot, but I think will matter next year is if you have agents acting on your behalf, like I almost think of it as if you have agents for payments, if you have agents for legal actions, if you have agents for shopping, they're all different sort of use cases or expressions, right? It's almost like me having assistants for different tasks I want to do.
Yeah.
How do you build the right like infrastructure to make sure you recognize what I'm delegating versus not? How do you inform me when like you notice? I mean, we're so used to getting that notification from a bank, right? Hey, did you make this transaction whenever there's anomalous behavior? Think about a world when it's you're making the transactions and your bots are making transactions. Like, how do we like manage identity, consumer identity?
I was going to ask you this. This is the thing that's like such a step change, which is agentic browsers, they already exist. Perplexity came out with one, right? And so it is changing what we need to think about as it relates to your point, identity and authentication. So can you just walk us down your thoughts around that?
We're at a time where we've had authentication and authorization constructs that have worked for human, right? For example, two-factor authentication, and now moving to passkeys. Like, we understand human behavior and we introduce verification at certain points to balance user experience and friction, right? So it's like always a trade-off between seamless user experience and verification and trust flows.
Yep.
For every single task you asked me to do, or you were trying to do in an app, if it constantly asked you to, like, I don't know, Face ID or put in your password, you would be frustrated.
Yes.
But with agents, that's not the case, right? For them, it's not really a task, like a tax on their flow, right? So I almost think we have to, in that UX versus friction or balance, we can err more on the side of friction to start with, where you limit the blast radius as much as you can. Like, you start with microsegmentation of permissions such that an agent, at least to start with, can do like one specific task for a human. And that delegation and authority will expand over time as you build more trust. But I almost think we have to err on the side of caution.
Right.
Because we also have a very diverse set of customers, right? And their own maturity. Like, our consumer maturity is so broad. Like, you have Gen Alpha, which is like just growing up by default with AI, and Gen Z, which is relatively comfortable with it. But then you also have boomers who will be at the other side of it. Imagine sometimes they may not even realize they're in an agentic browser and like
Oh, yeah.
kicking a transaction off, right? And so how do you like bring everyone along versus like, and then I think the last piece on trust I will say is, if we do go to a world where my awareness and purchase decisions are informed by these search agents, I do think we need markers that those agents are acting on our behalf and not on the highest bidder. Like, think about Google search, right?
Yeah.
Search engine optimization is an entire business. Like, the
Sure.
web is free because ads are monetized.
Yeah.
And so how do we think about that balance as we like shift to an agentic world where, like, yes, maybe I ask ChatGPT to make a purchase on my behalf, but I want to have the trust that it's acting on my behalf and not on the next vendor that wants to sell me something.
How do you not hear you? And my thought immediately goes to like, okay, great. If you're building trust and friction and all of this by design, which absolutely, this is a new world, how do you not let that stifle innovation?
I think it goes back to, there are things that are okay to move fast and break.
Mm.
And there are things that if you break trust, I actually think that stifles innovation more than the fact that you went a little bit slow to like put the right guardrails. Because earning back trust, I mean, think about our own personal relationships.
Yeah.
How much time does it take to repair a crack in a relationship?
There's a personal story here we'll get to later.
But I mean, versus like just not letting those cracks appear, right?
Totally.
And especially with adoption of new technology, I think if we can almost like trust by design, I always fall back to it because I think the cost to innovation and speed when you get it wrong is much higher than just investing in it upfront.
Beautiful. I have a couple of fun, quick hit questions to round us out, okay? This has been great so far. I've learned a ton. If you had to make a bold prediction about next year, or just in general, what would it be?
I think there are a lot of predictions out there about agents, AI. I was initially thinking about quantum as you were like asking that question. But I think the most like interesting one that I don't have a defined answer to is, what is the like monetization model of the new web? We've been in this world where we've monetized, internet is free, but we've monetized ads. And then from a content perspective, we're so used to paywalls, right? You want to use this, you want to read to the Wall Street Journal, like you subscribe to it. There are paywalls for like all the content you consume.
Yeah.
And the paywalls have been subscription primarily, right? I almost think like in 2026, we may see the collapse of the paywall economy. And the reason I say that is the reason we have paywalls was because of the concept we were talking about earlier, right? Which is friction versus convenience. And for humans, if I asked you to transact every time you wanted to access an article, you would be unwilling to. So I went to subscription where like you pay once and you forget about me for the rest of the year. For agents, that's not the case, right? So you could actually charge like cents per access,
Right?
and not have to get people to commit for a year.
Yeah.
So I think the evolution of that sort of paywall economy to whatever this transaction-based content access could be would be interesting.
What's something that you're personally excited to build with or prototype with heading into next year?
I think two aspects. One, I always think of Twilio as abstracting complexity. And I think for the next year, I'm thinking about how do we abstract complexity, not just on the AI stack, but on the communication stack, where like we have a combination of terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks. So, what does it look like with the combination of LEO, GEO satellites coming together and like us being able to enable our customers reach their consumers across those channels? That's one. The other one is genuinely quantum. I think like we're thinking about the implications of quantum cryptography and communication for our business. And I mean, it's one domain where I think the physical and the digital, like, it's fascinating. I think of quantum as like we went from analog to digital and we're going back to analog. And so I find it like this like vision where we're able to almost in the digital world bring the analog is like fascinating to me. So those are two areas.
I love that. I mean, you've hit me with some analog thoughts today. No screens, you said, and I said subscribe. So I'm here with you. My last question for you today. Any advice for the builders among us?
I think, everybody will tell you like, go learn about AI, become AI literate, be AI by default. I would say go back to fundamentals. They will never fail you. I absolutely agree. Like, be a learn it all, not a know it all. Like, that's my default mindset for any era, any decade, any moment. But I actually think this is a moment where going back to fundamentals around obsessing about the customer problem, not the cool tech, right? Being thoughtful about how you solve those problems, falling in love with those problems, identifying the soft signals, right? Because the world is changing, not just for us, but our customers. And like, if we can get ahead on thinking about the problems that they face, not just today, but will face tomorrow, we can help them. And so I think if there are builders out there, yes, like experiment with interesting technology, but please think about the problems that are pertinent to solve for our customers.
Yes.
And not just throw cool tech at them. Because there's nothing that would like, make the world better other than like us figuring out the most important problems to solve.
I love that. Back to the basics. Makes a ton of sense. Rikki, you gave us a ton to think about for next year, so I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.